Welcome, sit on down, and make yourself comfortable as we learn about a topic of great interest. Today, we will take a thoughtful journey into the life and ideas of one of philosophy's most provocative and misunderstood thinkers, Friedrich Nietzsche. My name is William, and I would like to thank you for joining me. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We cover a variety of intriguing topics you won't want to miss out on. In this first part, we'll explore who Nietzsche was, the world he lived in, and the intellectual forces that shaped his thought. We'll take our time, moving slowly and clearly so that even the most complex ideas can settle in like a quiet conversation. Friedrich Nietzsche was born on October 15th, 1844, in a small town called Rücken in what is now Germany. His father was a Lutheran pastor, and his early life was steeped in religious tradition. But Nietzsche's path would lead him far from the faith of his upbringing. He was a brilliant student, especially in languages and classical studies. By the age of 24, he became a professor of philology at the University of Basel in Switzerland, an extraordinary achievement for someone so young. But Nietzsche was not destined to remain in the academic world for long. Chronic health problems, migraines, vision issues, and digestive pain forced him to resign from his post just 10 years later. From then on, he lived a nomadic life, moving from town to town across Europe, writing in solitude. Nietzsche lived during a time of great change in Europe. The 19th century was marked by the rise of science, the decline of traditional religion, and the birth of modern industrial society. Darwin's theory of evolution had shaken the foundations of Christian belief. Political revolutions were reshaping nations, and philosophers like Kant, Hegel, and Schopenhauer were redefining how people thought about reality, morality, and the self. Nietzsche absorbed all of this and then challenged it. Nietzsche was deeply influenced by Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher who believed that life was driven by a blind, irrational force he called the will. Schopenhauer saw life as suffering and believed that art and asceticism were ways to escape it. Nietzsche admired Schopenhauer's honesty, but he rejected his pessimism. Instead, Nietzsche sought to affirm life, even in its pain and chaos. He was also inspired by Greek tragedy, especially the works of Aeschylus and Sophocles. He saw in ancient drama a raw, honest confrontation with the darker aspects of existence, something he felt modern society had lost. Nietzsche never fit neatly into any philosophical school. He didn't write like a traditional academic. His books are filled with aphorisms, poetic language, and provocations. He wanted to shake people awake, to challenge their assumptions and force them to think for themselves. He once wrote, "I am not a man, I am dynamite." And in many ways, he was. Before we go further, it's important to clear up a few common misunderstandings. Nietzsche was not a nihilist, though he explored nihilism deeply. He was not a supporter of fascism. His ideas were twisted and misused long after his death. And he was not simply a critic of religion. He was a critic of anything that, in his view, diminished human potential. Nietzsche's work is complex, often contradictory, and always challenging, but at its heart is a deep concern for human flourishing, for how we might live more fully, more honestly, and more courageously. Now let's take a moment to take a deeper look at some of Nietzsche's most prolific ideas, the will to power. One of Nietzsche's most central and often misunderstood ideas is the will to power. At its core, the will to power is not simply a desire for dominance or control. Rather, it is a fundamental drive that Nietzsche believed underlies all human behavior, and indeed, all life. For Nietzsche, the will to power is the force that compels us to grow, to assert ourselves, to overcome obstacles, and to shape the world around us. It is the creative energy that fuels ambition, innovation, and transformation. This idea stands in contrast to Schopenhauer's concept of the will to live, which Nietzsche saw as too passive and rooted in survival. Nietzsche's will to power is more expansive. It is about flourishing, not merely existing. Importantly, Nietzsche did not mean that everyone should seek political or social power. The will to power can manifest in art, in science, in personal development. It is about realizing one's potential and expressing one's unique vision of life. In this sense, the will to power is both a psychological insight and a philosophical principle. It challenges us to ask, what drives us? What are we striving for? And how can we channel our inner strength towards something meaningful? God is dead. Perhaps Nietzsche's most famous and most misunderstood statement is, God is dead. This phrase appears in several of his works, most notably in The Gay Science and Thus Spoke Zarathustra. But Nietzsche was not celebrating the death of a deity. Rather, he was diagnosing a profound cultural shift. By saying God is dead, Nietzsche meant that the traditional foundations of morality, meaning, and truth, rooted in religion, were no longer credible in the modern world. Science, secularism, and rationalism had eroded the authority of religious belief. But Nietzsche did not see this as a triumph. In fact, he saw it as a crisis. Without the guiding framework of religion, humanity faced a void, a sense of meaninglessness and disorientation. This, he believed, could lead to nihilism. Nietzsche's challenge was to find a new foundation for values, one that did not rely on divine authority. He believed that we must become the creators of our own meaning, forging values that affirm life rather than deny it. In this way, God is dead is not a conclusion, but a call to action. It is an invitation to reimagine what it means to live a meaningful life in a world without absolute truths. Eternal recurrence. Another of Nietzsche's profound and enigmatic ideas is the concept of eternal recurrence. Imagine, he says, that you must live your life over and over again, exactly the same, down to the smallest detail, for all eternity. Every joy, every sorrow, every decision, repeated endlessly. This thought experiment is not meant to be taken literally. Rather, it is a test of one's attitude toward life. If the idea of eternal recurrence fills you with dread, Nietzsche suggests, then perhaps you are not living in a way that affirms life. But if you could embrace this idea, if you could say yes to your life, even with all its pain and imperfection, then you are living authentically and courageously. Eternal recurrence challenges us to consider the weight of our choices. It asks, are you living in a way that you would be willing to repeat forever? In this sense, it is both a metaphysical idea and a moral challenge. It invites us to live deliberately, to take responsibility for our lives, and to find meaning in the act of living itself. Master versus slave morality. Nietzsche's analysis of morality is one of his most provocative contributions to philosophy. He distinguishes between two fundamental types of morality: master morality and slave morality. Master morality arises from the perspective of the strong, the noble, and the self-assured. It values qualities like strength, courage, pride, and vitality. Good in this framework is associated with what is life-affirming and powerful. Slave morality, on the other hand, emerges from the perspective of the weak and oppressed. It values humility, compassion, obedience, and self-denial. In this framework, Good is defined in opposition to the powerful. What is not strong, not proud, not dominant. Nietzsche believed that slave morality arose as a reaction, a way for the powerless to assert moral superiority over their oppressors. He saw this in the rise of Judeo-Christian ethics, which he believed inverted traditional values. This distinction is not merely historical. Nietzsche believed that modern morality still bears the imprint of slave morality, encouraging conformity, guilt, and resentment rather than strength and creativity. His goal was not to endorse cruelty or domination, but to challenge us to examine the origins of our values. Are they life-affirming? Do they reflect strength and vitality? Or are they rooted in fear and resentment? The Übermensch, the Overman. The concept of the Übermensch or Overman is one of Nietzsche's most ambitious and inspiring ideas. The Übermensch represents an ideal, a person who has transcended conventional morality and created their own values. This figure lives with courage, creativity, and a deep affirmation of life. Nietzsche introduces the Übermensch in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, where Zarathustra proclaims, "Man is something that shall be overcome." The Übermensch is what comes after, what humanity can aspire to become. This idea is not about superiority in a social or political sense. It is about spiritual and existential transformation. The Übermensch is someone who embraces the chaos of life, who says yes to existence, and who lives with authenticity and purpose. In a world where God is dead, the Übermensch becomes the creator of meaning. This figure does not rely on external authority, but draws strength from within. Nietzsche did not claim to be the Übermensch, nor did he believe that such a person had yet existed. It is an ideal, a guiding star for those who seek to live fully and freely. The Übermensch challenges us to rise above herd mentality, to confront life's difficulties with courage, and to become who we truly are. Nietzsche's style and writings. Nietzsche's writing style is as distinctive as his philosophy. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he did not write in the formal, systematic style typical of academic philosophy. Instead, his works are often poetic, fragmented, and aphoristic, designed to provoke thought rather than to present a rigid argument. One of Nietzsche's most notable stylistic choices is his use of aphorisms, short, pithy statements that encapsulate complex ideas. These aphorisms are not merely stylistic flourishes. They reflect Nietzsche's belief that truth is multifaceted and cannot always be captured in linear, discursive prose. By presenting his thoughts in fragments, Nietzsche invites the reader to engage actively with the text, to interpret, question, and reflect. His language is often metaphorical and poetic. He employs vivid imagery, irony, and rhetorical questions to challenge the reader's assumptions. This style is particularly evident in works like The Gay Science, where Nietzsche blends lyrical prose with philosophical insight, and in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which reads more like a philosophical novel or epic poem than a traditional treatise. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is perhaps Nietzsche's most stylistically ambitious work. It introduces the character of Zarathustra, a prophet-like figure who delivers Nietzsche's ideas in parables and poetic declarations. The book explores themes such as the death of God, the Übermensch, and eternal recurrence, all conveyed through a rich, symbolic narrative. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche adopts a more direct but still provocative tone. The book critiques traditional morality and philosophical dogmatism, using sharp wit and incisive commentary. Even here, Nietzsche avoids systematic exposition, preferring instead to challenge the reader with bold assertions and unexpected turns of thought. Nietzsche's style serves a philosophical purpose. He believed that philosophy should not merely inform, but transform, that it should awaken the reader to new ways of thinking and being. His unconventional style is thus an extension of his philosophical mission: to unsettle, to inspire, and to liberate. By refusing to conform to academic norms, Nietzsche created a body of work that is both intellectually rigorous and artistically compelling. His writings continue to captivate readers not only for their ideas, but for their literary brilliance. Nietzsche's influence. Friedrich Nietzsche's influence stretches far beyond the boundaries of traditional philosophy. His ideas have permeated psychology, literature, existential thought, and modern culture in ways that continue to shape intellectual discourse today. In psychology, Nietzsche's concept of the will to power and his exploration of human drives laid the groundwork for later thinkers like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Freud's theory of the unconscious and the dynamic interplay of human instincts echoes Nietzsche's view of the mind as a battleground of competing forces. Carl Jung, meanwhile, drew upon Nietzsche's archetypes and symbolic language, particularly in his understanding of the shadow and individuation. In philosophy, Nietzsche is often seen as a precursor to existentialism. His emphasis on individual meaning-making, the rejection of absolute truths, and the confrontation with nihilism deeply influenced thinkers such as Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus. Heidegger engaged extensively with Nietzsche's writings, especially on metaphysics and the history of being. Sartre and Camus, while differing in their interpretations, both grappled with the challenge of creating meaning in a world without inherent purpose, a theme central to Nietzsche's work. Nietzsche's literary style also left a mark on modern literature. His use of aphorisms, metaphor, and poetic language inspired writers to blend philosophical depth with artistic expression. His work encouraged a more personal, introspective form of writing that blurred the lines between philosophy and literature. In culture, Nietzsche's ideas have been both celebrated and misunderstood. His concept of the Übermensch was misappropriated by political ideologies, but in its original form, it was a call for self-overcoming and creative transformation. His critique of herd mentality and conventional morality continues to resonate in discussions about authenticity, freedom, and the role of the individual in society. Nietzsche's influence is not confined to academic circles. His thought challenges readers to confront uncomfortable truths, question inherited beliefs, and seek deeper understanding. In this way, Nietzsche remains a philosopher not just of ideas, but of life itself. Nietzsche's influence on contemporary philosophy is profound and far-reaching. His critique of objective truth, morality, and metaphysics laid the groundwork for postmodern and post-structuralist thought. Philosophers like Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, and Gilles Deleuze drew heavily on Nietzsche's ideas to challenge traditional assumptions about knowledge and power. Foucault, for instance, adopted Nietzsche's genealogical method to analyze the historical construction of social norms. Derrida's deconstruction echoes Nietzsche's suspicion of fixed meanings and binary oppositions. Nietzsche's emphasis on perspective, interpretation, and the will to power continues to shape debates in ethics, epistemology, and political theory. His legacy is not confined to any one school of thought. It is a living force that continues to provoke, inspire, and unsettle. Nietzsche's insights into the human psyche have had a lasting impact on psychology and psychotherapy. His exploration of unconscious drives, internal conflict, and the construction of identity anticipated many of the ideas later developed by Freud, Jung, and others. Freud acknowledged Nietzsche's psychological depth, even as he pursued a different theoretical path. Jung, in particular, was deeply influenced by Nietzsche's symbolic language and his emphasis on individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated self. In modern therapy, Nietzsche's ideas resonate in existential and humanistic approaches, which emphasize personal meaning, authenticity, and the courage to face life's challenges. Therapists draw on Nietzsche's call to embrace suffering, confront inner contradictions, and live with purpose. His work continues to inspire those who seek not just to treat symptoms, but to help individuals grow into their fullest selves. More than a century after his death, Nietzsche remains one of the most quoted, debated, and misunderstood philosophers in the world. His aphorisms appear in films, novels, music lyrics, and social media posts. His ideas resonate with artists, activists, entrepreneurs, and thinkers across disciplines. Why does Nietzsche continue to captivate the modern imagination? Perhaps it is because he speaks to the existential challenges of our time. The search for meaning in a secular world, the tension between individuality and conformity, the desire to live authentically in the face of uncertainty. Nietzsche's fearless questioning, his poetic style, and his call to self-overcoming offer both solace and provocation. He does not provide easy answers, but he invites us to think deeply, to live courageously, and to embrace the complexity of existence. In a world hungry for depth and authenticity, Nietzsche's voice remains as vital as ever. While Nietzsche's writings contain controversial remarks about women, his philosophy has nonetheless influenced feminist thought in complex ways. Some feminist scholars have found value in Nietzsche's critique of traditional morality and his emphasis on self-overcoming. His rejection of fixed identities and his call for the creation of new values resonate with feminist efforts to challenge patriarchal norms. Thinkers like Judith Butler and Hélène Cixous have engaged with Nietzsche's ideas to explore gender as a performative and fluid construct. Moreover, Nietzsche's emphasis on embodiment, affect, and the critique of rationalism aligns with feminist critiques of Enlightenment ideals. While Nietzsche himself may not have been a feminist, his philosophy has opened pathways for feminist reinterpretation and innovation. Art held a central place in Nietzsche's philosophy. He saw the artist as a figure who confronts chaos and gives it form, who transforms suffering into beauty. Nietzsche admired the tragic artists of ancient Greece, who did not shy away from the darkness of existence, but illuminated it through their work. He believed that the creative process was inherently difficult, requiring the artist to wrestle with inner demons and existential questions. Yet it was precisely this struggle that gave art its power. For Nietzsche, the artist was a model of the self-overcoming individual, someone who affirms life by creating meaning where none is given. In a world without absolute truths, art becomes a way of expressing and shaping one's own values. Nietzsche viewed suffering not as something to be avoided at all costs, but as a vital and transformative aspect of life. He believed that through suffering, individuals could grow, deepen their understanding of themselves, and cultivate resilience. In his famous phrase, "What does not kill me makes me stronger," Nietzsche encapsulates the idea that adversity can be a crucible for personal development. Rather than seeking comfort or escape, Nietzsche encouraged embracing life's hardships as opportunities for self-overcoming. This perspective challenges modern attitudes that often pathologize discomfort and seek to eliminate pain. For Nietzsche, suffering was not merely a burden, it was a gateway to authenticity and strength. Nietzsche held complex views on friendship and love. He valued deep, challenging friendships that fostered growth and intellectual stimulation. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he writes of the friend as a higher self, someone who pushes us to become better. He was skeptical of romantic love that dissolved individuality or led to dependency. Instead, he envisioned love as a dynamic interplay between strong individuals who respect each other's autonomy. Nietzsche's ideal relationship was one of mutual challenge and inspiration, not comfort or conformity. This view invites us to reconsider the purpose of our closest relationships, not as escapes from the world, but as arenas for becoming more fully ourselves. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy lies the idea of self-creation. He believed that individuals should not passively accept inherited values or societal norms, but instead actively shape their own identity and moral framework. This process of self-creation is not about indulgence or egoism. It is a rigorous, ongoing effort to become who one truly is. Nietzsche admired those who could forge their own path, who lived authentically and courageously in the face of uncertainty. He saw the ethical life not as adherence to rules, but as a creative act, a form of artistry. In this view, each person becomes a kind of sculptor, chiseling away at their character, refining their values, and striving toward a unique ideal. This ethic of self-creation challenges us to take full responsibility for our lives, to question deeply, and to live deliberately. While Nietzsche is often portrayed as a stern and serious thinker, his work is also rich with humor, irony, and wit. He used these rhetorical tools not just for style, but as philosophical strategies. Irony allowed Nietzsche to challenge dogma and expose contradictions without resorting to didacticism. His aphorisms often contain layers of meaning, inviting the reader to reflect, question, and sometimes laugh. Nietzsche's humor is not lighthearted in the conventional sense. It is often dark, biting, and subversive, but it serves an important purpose: to unsettle complacency and provoke thought. In works like The Gay Science, Nietzsche plays with language and tone, blending joy and seriousness in a way that reflects the complexity of life itself. He believed that philosophy should not be a solemn affair, but a dance, a celebration of thought and existence. This playful spirit is part of what makes Nietzsche's writing so enduring. It reminds us that even in the face of profound questions, there is room for laughter, for irony, and for the joy of thinking freely. Nietzsche's views on free will are complex and often paradoxical. He rejected the traditional notion of free will as a metaphysical faculty that allows individuals to choose independently of causality. In his view, this concept was a fiction invented by moralists to assign blame and guilt. Instead, Nietzsche emphasized the unconscious drives and instincts that shape human behavior. He believed that our actions are the result of deep psychological forces, not rational deliberation. However, this does not mean Nietzsche denied agency altogether. He advocated for a kind of freedom that comes from self-knowledge and self-mastery. True freedom for Nietzsche is not the absence of constraint, but the ability to shape one's character and destiny through conscious effort. It is the freedom of the artist, the creator, the individual who transforms necessity into virtue. In this sense, Nietzsche's philosophy offers a more nuanced and empowering vision of human freedom. What would Nietzsche say about the digital age? While he lived in the 19th century, many of his concerns feel strikingly relevant today. He warned against herd mentality and the loss of individuality, phenomena that are amplified by social media and algorithm-driven content. In a world where likes and shares often dictate value, Nietzsche's call to create one's own values is more urgent than ever. He might view the internet as both a danger and an opportunity, a space where conformity thrives, but also where new forms of expression and self-overcoming are possible. Nietzsche would likely challenge us to use technology not as a distraction, but as a tool for reflection, creativity, and connection. His philosophy invites us to resist passive consumption and instead engage with the digital world as active, thoughtful participants. Nietzsche's reflections on time are woven throughout his work, though he never developed a systematic theory of temporality. Instead, he approached time through metaphor, myth, and existential insight. His concept of eternal recurrence is perhaps the most striking example, a radical thought experiment that challenges us to imagine living our lives over and over again, eternally. This idea forces a confrontation with the present moment. Are we living in a way that we would willingly repeat forever? Nietzsche's emphasis on the present aligns with his rejection of metaphysical abstractions. He distrusted philosophies that placed meaning in a distant past or an imagined future. For Nietzsche, the only time that truly matters is now, the lived, embodied moment. This focus on the present is not a call for hedonism, but for authenticity. It is a challenge to live deliberately, to act with intention, and to embrace the fleeting nature of existence. In this way, Nietzsche's philosophy of time is deeply ethical. It asks us to take responsibility for our lives, not in some abstract future, but here and now. Mortality was a central theme in Nietzsche's thought. He believed that awareness of death could sharpen our appreciation of life and motivate us to live more fully. Rather than fearing death or seeking comfort in promises of an afterlife, Nietzsche urged us to confront our finitude with honesty and courage. His concept of eternal recurrence is one way of grappling with mortality. It asks us to imagine living our lives over and over, and to consider whether we are living in a way that we would willingly repeat. This reflection is not meant to induce despair, but to inspire intentionality. Nietzsche's reflections on death are ultimately life-affirming. They remind us that our time is limited and that meaning must be created, not discovered. In facing death, we are called to embrace life, not as a rehearsal for something beyond, but as the main event. Nietzsche was fascinated by the idea of greatness, not in the conventional sense of fame or power, but as a measure of inner strength, creativity, and the ability to shape one's own destiny. He admired individuals who defied norms, who lived authentically, and who created new values. Figures like Goethe, Beethoven, and Napoleon often appeared in his writings as examples of this kind of greatness. For Nietzsche, greatness was not about conformity or comfort, but about struggle, transformation, and self-overcoming. He believed that true greatness required solitude, courage, and a willingness to confront the abyss of existence. In a world increasingly driven by mediocrity and herd mentality, Nietzsche's call to greatness remains a radical and inspiring challenge. Music held a special place in Nietzsche's heart. He was not only a philosopher, but also a composer, and he believed that music could express truths that language could not. His early admiration for Richard Wagner was rooted in a shared belief in the transformative power of art. Nietzsche saw in Wagner's operas a revival of the Dionysian spirit, a raw, ecstatic force that could break through the constraints of rationality. However, their relationship soured as Nietzsche grew critical of Wagner's nationalism and religiosity. Despite this, Nietzsche never abandoned his belief in the importance of art. He saw art as a means of affirming life, of confronting suffering with beauty and creativity. In The Birth of Tragedy, he argued that Greek tragedy achieved this synthesis through the interplay of the Apollonian and Dionysian forces, order and chaos, reason and ecstasy. For Nietzsche, art was not a luxury, but a necessity, a way of making life bearable and meaningful. Nietzsche had strong views on education, which he saw as a means of cultivating individuality rather than conformity. He criticized the mass education systems of his time for promoting mediocrity and suppressing creativity. For Nietzsche, true education should inspire students to think independently, to question received wisdom, and to develop their unique talents. He believed that education should be a transformative experience, one that awakens the spirit and fosters a love of wisdom. Nietzsche's ideal educator is not a mere transmitter of knowledge, but a guide who challenges and provokes. His philosophy encourages us to rethink the purpose of education and to prioritize depth, authenticity, and intellectual courage. Nietzsche was acutely aware of the limitations and power of language. He believed that language shapes our perception of reality, but also distorts it. Words for Nietzsche are metaphors that have lost their vividness, concepts that conceal the uniqueness of individual experiences. He argued that philosophical systems often rely on rigid linguistic structures that obscure the fluidity of life. Nietzsche's own writing style, aphoristic, poetic, and provocative, was a deliberate attempt to break free from conventional language. He wanted to awaken readers to the inadequacy of words and the need to think beyond them. In this way, Nietzsche anticipated later developments in linguistic philosophy and deconstruction. His insights into language challenge us to question the assumptions embedded in our speech and to seek more authentic modes of expression. Nietzsche's vision of the future was both hopeful and cautionary. He foresaw the decline of traditional values and the rise of nihilism, but he also envisioned the possibility of a new kind of humanity, one that embraces life with strength and creativity. The Übermensch represents this future ideal, a person who transcends herd mentality and lives with purpose. Nietzsche believed that the future would require individuals to become value creators, to forge meaning in a world without absolutes. He warned against the dangers of passive conformity and called for a radical reimagining of human potential. In an age of rapid change and existential uncertainty, Nietzsche's vision remains a powerful call to live deliberately, courageously, and authentically. The final years of Nietzsche's life were marked by both prolific creativity and tragic decline. In the late 1880s, he wrote feverishly, producing some of his most provocative works, including Twilight of the Idols, The Antichrist, and Ecce Homo. These texts reflect a philosopher at the height of his powers, bold, unfiltered, and deeply introspective. Yet in January 1889, Nietzsche suffered a mental collapse in Turin, Italy. The exact cause remains debated, but he never recovered. He spent the remaining years of his life in a state of mental incapacity, cared for by his mother and later his sister. During this time, his unpublished writings were edited and sometimes distorted by his sister, Elizabeth, who sought to align his legacy with her own ideological views. Despite this, Nietzsche's influence only grew. His unfinished notes, later compiled as The Will to Power, offer glimpses into the directions his thought might have taken. Nietzsche died in 1900, but his ideas continued to resonate, challenging, inspiring, and unsettling generations of readers. His final years remind us of the fragility of genius and of the enduring power of a mind that dared to think beyond the boundaries of its time. Nietzsche's critique of modern morality is one of his most enduring and controversial contributions to philosophy. He believed that contemporary moral systems, particularly those rooted in Christianity and Enlightenment rationalism, were life-denying. They promoted values like humility, obedience, and self-sacrifice, which Nietzsche saw as symptoms of weakness and resentment. In his view, these moralities emerged not from strength, but from the resentment of the powerless. Nietzsche traced the genealogy of morals to uncover their origins in social and psychological dynamics. He argued that what we call good and evil are not eternal truths, but historical constructs shaped by power relations. This radical perspective invites us to question the moral assumptions we take for granted. Are our values truly our own, or have they been imposed upon us by tradition and authority? Nietzsche did not advocate for amorality or cruelty. Rather, he called for a revaluation of values, a courageous reassessment of what it means to live well. He envisioned a morality rooted in vitality, creativity, and self-overcoming. Such a morality would affirm life in all its complexity, rather than seeking to tame or deny it. Friedrich Nietzsche's work has been the subject of intense debate, admiration, and controversy since his death in 1900. While his influence on modern thought is undeniable, his ideas have often been misinterpreted, misused, or taken out of context. In this final section, we will explore some of the most common misreadings of Nietzsche's philosophy and reflect on his enduring legacy. One of the most persistent misconceptions is the belief that Nietzsche was a nihilist. While he did explore the concept of nihilism, particularly the cultural and existential consequences of the death of God, Nietzsche did not advocate for nihilism as a world-view. Instead, he saw it as a crisis to be overcome. For Nietzsche, the collapse of traditional values created a vacuum, but also an opportunity, the chance to create new values rooted in life, creativity, and strength. His philosophy was not a surrender to meaninglessness, but a call to rise above it. Another damaging misinterpretation is the association of Nietzsche's work with fascism and Nazi ideology. This distortion was largely the result of selective editing and manipulation by Nietzsche's sister, Elizabeth Förster Nietzsche, who was sympathetic to nationalist and anti-Semitic causes. After Nietzsche's death, she curated and altered his unpublished writings to align with her own political views. As a result, Nietzsche was posthumously co-opted by the Nazi regime. Despite the fact that he was explicitly critical of anti-Semitism, nationalism, and authoritarianism during his lifetime. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or Overman, has also been widely misunderstood. It is not a blueprint for racial or political superiority, but rather a metaphor for individual self-overcoming and the creation of personal values. The Übermensch is someone who transcends herd morality and lives authentically, embracing life's challenges with courage and creativity. Despite these misinterpretations, Nietzsche's legacy remains profound. He is considered a foundational figure in existentialism, postmodernism, and depth psychology. Thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Michel Foucault, Carl Jung, and Martin Heidegger have all engaged deeply with his work. His critique of morality, religion, and culture continues to resonate in contemporary debates about identity, ethics, and the human condition. Nietzsche's writing style, poetic, aphoristic, and often enigmatic, has also influenced literature and the arts. His willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and challenge societal norms has made him a symbol of intellectual courage and philosophical rebellion. In the end, Nietzsche's enduring appeal lies in his insistence that we confront life honestly, without illusions, and that we take responsibility for shaping our own values and destinies. His work invites us not to follow, but to think, to question, to create, and to become who we are. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and thoughts of Friedrich Nietzsche. We've explored his core philosophical ideas, his poetic and provocative style, and the lasting impact he's had on modern thought. We've also taken time to reflect on the ways his work has been misunderstood, and why it continues to challenge and inspire thinkers today. Nietzsche's philosophy is not a set of answers, but an invitation to question, to look inward, to confront the assumptions of our time, and to imagine new ways of living with courage and authenticity. As you move forward, may these ideas stay with you, not as doctrines, but as sparks for your own reflection. Until next time, take care and keep thinking. Thank you.